Prologue. As usual, the man I had once planned to marry called to blame me for everything, but his accusations barely reached me. I was standing in a small apartment in northern Italy with our newborn son asleep against my chest. Morning light poured through the balcony doors, turning the white walls gold. Somewhere below, a delivery scooter rattled over the old stone street. My son, Colin, made a soft sound in his sleep and curled one tiny hand against my collarbone. On the phone, Thorn was shouting. "You disappeared," he said. "You took my child away from me before I even knew he existed. Do you understand what you've done?" I looked down at the baby he had never known I was carrying. The baby I had once imagined telling him about with a pair of knitted booties at our wedding. Our wedding. Even then, the thought almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because sometimes pain becomes so complete that laughter is the only sound your body can make without breaking. "You're talking about honesty," I asked quietly. "You brought another woman into the house I paid for. You let her photograph my kitchen and call it her future home. You were planning a life with her while I washed your clothes, cooked your meals, and carried your son." There was silence on the line. Then he did what people like Thorn always do, when the truth leaves them nowhere to hide. He blamed me. He said I had destroyed us. He said I had humiliated him. He said I had no right to make decisions without him. And later, his mother called and told me I had to come home. "You owe it to Thorn," she said. "You owe it to your son. You owe it to both families." I held Colin closer and stared out at the red roofs, the laundry moving in the warm breeze, the life I had built from the ruins of the one Thorn destroyed. "No," I said. My voice did not shake. "I don't owe anyone anything." But 9 months earlier, I had believed I owed Thorn everything. Patience, loyalty, trust, forgiveness, even the inheritance my grandmother had left me. I believed love meant building a home around a man and calling his comfort our future. I believed 5 years together had earned me the truth. Then a wedding venue called with a cancellation for August, and the man I loved looked at me as if I had just handed him a prison sentence. That was the day my life began to end. It was also the day I finally began to save it. Chapter 1. The call came on a Saturday morning in early June. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, making coffee while Thorn sat at the island scrolling through his phone. The windows were open, and the whole house smelled like fresh-cut grass and the cinnamon rolls I had put in the oven. It was one of those ordinary mornings that seem worthless until your life splits into before and after. "Miranda Ellis," a cheerful woman asked when I answered. "Yes." "This is Claire from Willowbrook Estate. You and your fiancé toured with us last October and joined our cancellation list." I straightened so quickly, I nearly spilled my coffee. Willowbrook was a restored country estate about 40 minutes outside the city, with pale stone walls, gardens full of climbing roses, and a small lake behind the ceremony lawn. Thorn and I had visited on a chilly afternoon the previous fall. I had fallen in love with the place before we even reached the front doors. "We had an August date become available," Claire continued. "Saturday the 22nd. I know you originally requested next summer, but I wanted to offer it to you first." My heart began pounding. "Yes," I said before she had even finished. Then I laughed. "I mean, I need to talk to Thorn, of course. How long can you hold it?" "Until Monday at noon." "That's perfect. Thank you so much." When I ended the call, I stood in the middle of the kitchen smiling at nothing. The timing felt like fate. Thorn and I had been together for almost 5 years and had lived together for 3. We had never treated our relationship as temporary. We shared bills, holidays, routines, friends, and eventually a house. The house had been too expensive for us. Thorn had admitted that immediately, but my grandmother had left me an inheritance, and I had put almost all of it toward the down payment. My father and my brother, Nick, had insisted that the ownership percentages be written clearly into the purchase documents. 70% mine, 30% Thorn's. At the time, I had been offended. "We're building a life together," I told them. "Why are you acting as if I need protection from him?" "Because loving someone and protecting yourself are not opposites," my father had said. I did not understand him then. The house was large, warm, and full of plans. We had painted the living room together. I had chosen the curtains. Thorn had built shelves in the den and complained for a week about the instructions. There was a spare bedroom upstairs that we joked would one day become a nursery. And now, although no one knew it yet, that future had already begun. My period was 2 weeks late. The night before, after Thorn fell asleep, I had taken a test in the downstairs bathroom. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately. I had sat on the closed toilet lid with both hands over my mouth, laughing and crying at the same time. I had not told him. I wanted one day to myself, to hold the secret close before it became everybody's news. And then, after the call from Willowbrook, a new idea formed. We could get married in August. I could wait until the ceremony and give him a tiny pair of knitted booties during our vows. I pictured the surprise on his face, the way he would pull me into his arms, the way our families would cry. I was raised by conservative parents, and although I knew a marriage certificate did not create love, I still wanted my child to be born after we made our promises officially. Everything seemed to be falling into place. I hurried into the living room. "Thorn," I said, almost breathless, "you are not going to believe who just called." He looked up from his phone. I told him about the cancellation, the August date, the chance to have the wedding we wanted a full year early. I expected him to grin. I expected him to stand, pull me against him, maybe even spin me around the way he had when we got the house keys. Instead, he went still. Not thoughtful, not surprised. Still. His phone remained in his hand, but the screen went dark. His eyes stayed on me, and for several seconds he said nothing at all. The smile faded from my face. "Are you not happy?" I asked. "What? Of course I'm happy." He blinked as if waking from sleep. "I'm just August." "Yes, August 22nd. That's too soon. It's more than 2 months away." "Exactly. 2 months is nothing when you're planning a wedding." We never wanted a huge wedding. He stood and walked toward the window. "It could be cold." I stared at him. "In August. Or too hot. You know how unpredictable the weather is." The ceremony lawn has an indoor backup. People take vacations in August. We'd have 40 guests, Thorn. We can ask them. I might not be able to get enough time off for a honeymoon. We said we'd take a long weekend now, and a real trip later. He rubbed the back of his neck. Every objection appeared only after I answered the one before it. Weather, guests, money, work, his friend George's schedule, the florist, the suit, the invitations. I kept solving problems, and he kept inventing new ones. At last I stopped talking. The cinnamon rolls began to burn. Neither of us moved to take them out of the oven. Chapter 2. By noon, our conversation had become an argument. Thorn paced between the living room and kitchen, his voice growing sharper each time I refused to accept another excuse. "You're making this sound simple when it isn't," he said. "It is simple. We either want to get married or we don't." "That's not fair." "What part isn't fair?" "The way you're pushing me into a corner." The words struck me harder than he seemed to realize. A corner. After 5 years together, after buying a house, after discussing children and retirement accounts, and whether we should replace the roof next spring, marriage was a corner I had pushed him into. I pressed a hand against my lower stomach without thinking. There was no visible change yet, nothing anyone could see. But I knew our child was there, smaller than a seed, depending on me while the room seemed to tilt. "Thorn," I said carefully, "do you want to marry me?" He looked offended. "What kind of question is that?" "A direct one." "I proposed, did I?" 11 months ago. And we've been planning. We toured one venue and joined a waiting list. That still counts. Then answer me. My throat tightened. "Do you want to marry me?" He looked away. It lasted only a second, maybe less, but I saw it. Fear moved through me like cold water. Until that moment, I had been arguing about a date. Suddenly, I understood that the date was irrelevant. August, next June, 5 years from now, it would always be too soon if the man standing in front of me was waiting for another life to begin. "Is there someone else?" I asked. His head snapped back toward me. "No." "Then why do you look terrified?" "I'm not terrified. I'm frustrated because you're turning one phone call into a test of our entire relationship." I'm asking because I need the truth. You always do this. I almost laughed. Always do what? Make everything emotional. I stood very still. That sentence was one he used whenever my feelings became inconvenient. If I asked why he had forgotten an anniversary, I was emotional. If I wanted him to help more around the house, I was emotional. If he arrived home 3 hours late without texting, I was emotional. For years, I had accepted the word as if emotion were a flaw and not a signal. I love you, I said. I don't want to force you to marry me. If you changed your mind, tell me. If you met someone, tell me. It will hurt, but I would rather be hurt by the truth than comforted by a lie. His face softened, and for one desperate moment, I thought he might cross the room and take my hands. Instead, he sighed. There's no one else. I love you. The words were correct. The voice was not. There was no warmth in it, no urgency, no fear of losing me. He sounded like a man reading an answer he knew was expected. Still, I loved him. Love can make an intelligent woman negotiate with evidence. It can make her call instinct insecurity and call dread imagination. It can make her search for any explanation except the one standing plainly in front of her. Maybe he was anxious about money. Maybe he hated being the center of attention. Maybe he was planning some elaborate surprise, and I was ruining it by asking questions. I had never known Thorn to plan elaborate surprises, but hope is shameless. It will dress itself in any costume to survive. All right, I said. Think about it today. Willowbrook needs an answer by Monday. If you don't want the August date, tell me tonight. His shoulders relaxed. I noticed it immediately. He was relieved, not because I trusted him, but because the conversation was ending. I spent the rest of the day doing what I always did. I drove to the grocery store and bought his favorite coffee, the expensive brand he claimed tasted less bitter. I cleaned both bathrooms. I washed the sheets. I vacuumed the stairs and wiped fingerprints from the refrigerator. I ironed 5 office shirts for his week because he hated doing it and said I was better at getting the collars right. While the washing machine ran, I stood in the laundry room holding one of his blue shirts and wondered how many years of love could disappear inside a man without making a sound. At dinner, I served lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, and the salad he liked with walnuts and dried cranberries. He complimented the chicken. He talked about a problem at work. He did not mention Willowbrook. Neither did I. At 9:30, after the estate office had closed, we sat on the couch watching a movie. I rose to make more popcorn. Miranda, he said. I stopped. I've been thinking. My heart began to beat faster. I don't want to get married at Willowbrook. I waited. That's the real issue, he continued. I didn't like it when we toured. I only said I did because you loved it. In another version of my life, I might have felt relieved. I might have hugged him and said we could choose another place. But something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was the pause before he said he loved me. Maybe it was the relief on his face when I stopped asking questions. Maybe motherhood had already begun changing the way I listened. Whatever the reason, I knew he was lying. Chapter 3. I did not accuse him again. That was the first thing that frightened me about myself. Normally, I wanted everything discussed immediately. I hated unresolved tension. I believed healthy couples talked until the truth was clear and everyone felt heard. But when Thorn told me he simply disliked Willowbrook, I nodded. Okay, I said, we'll look somewhere else. His smile came too quickly. Great, I knew you'd understand. Understand. The word stayed with me all night. The next morning, Sunday, Thorn mentioned that George was coming over to watch a game. George had known Thorn since college. He was the friend who helped us move into the house and who had been promised the role of best man whenever our wedding finally happened. I had already told my brother Nick that I could watch his 2-year-old daughter, Lily, so he could take Viola out for an anniversary lunch. It had been my idea. When I mentioned it to Thorn, I watched his face carefully. Nick is surprising Viola, I said. He made a reservation at that little French place downtown. He even bought flowers. That's nice, Thorn said, opening the refrigerator. No flicker of recognition, no secret smile, nothing that suggested he was planning a surprise of his own. A reasonable woman would have left for her brother's house and tried to enjoy the day. I was no longer a reasonable woman. I was a woman who had asked the man she loved whether he wanted to marry her and watched him search for an escape. I owned an older phone that I kept charged as a backup. Before George arrived, I placed it behind a row of books on the built-in shelves in the living room. I opened a voice-activated recording app and tested it twice. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. I hated what I was doing. I told myself it was an invasion of privacy. I told myself that if I trusted Thorn so little, the relationship was already damaged. I told myself a dozen moral truths. Then I remembered the way he had looked at me when I said August. I pressed record. At Nick's house, Viola greeted me with a hug and immediately narrowed her eyes. "You look pale." "I didn't sleep well." "Are you sick?" For half a second, I wanted to tell her everything. The positive test, the argument, the phone hidden in my living room. Instead, I smiled, just tired. Nick came down the stairs carrying Lily, who wore one pink sock and one yellow one. "She dressed herself," he said proudly. "She chose socks," Viola corrected. "You failed to intervene." Lily reached for me, and I took her into my arms. She smelled like baby shampoo and strawberries. Her warm cheek rested against mine as if she had complete faith that I would not let her fall. Something opened painfully in my chest. I was going to be a mother. The thought should have felt joyful. Instead, it stood beside another thought I could not stop. What if I was going to be a mother alone? Nick and Viola left, still laughing about the socks. I spent the next few hours building block towers, cutting grapes into quarters, and reading the same picture book 5 times because Lily shouted again. Every time I reached the last page. I watched her run across the living room on unsteady legs and imagined a child with Thorn's dark hair and my eyes. I imagined first steps in our hallway, birthday cakes in our kitchen, pencil marks on the doorframe. Then I remembered that Thorn might be imagining those things with someone else. At one point, Lily fell asleep on my chest. I sat on the couch with one hand supporting her back and the other resting over my stomach. "I don't know what's happening," I whispered to the life inside me, "but I promise I'll figure it out." It was the first promise I made to my child. It would not be the last. Chapter 4. Nick and Viola returned later than planned, glowing in the quiet, comfortable way of people who had been reminded why they chose each other. Viola carried a small bouquet of white flowers. Nick had loosened his tie, and there was lipstick on his cheek. "Best babysitter in the world," he announced when he saw Lily asleep beside me. I smiled, but envy tightened my throat. Not envy of the restaurant or the flowers. I envied the ease between them. Nick looked at Viola when she spoke. He noticed when her glass was empty. He reached for her hand without thinking. Their marriage was not perfect. I knew that. They argued about money, his long hours, and whether he let Lily eat too many crackers. But beneath every disagreement was the certainty that they were on the same side. I had believed Thorn, and I were on the same side too. "Stay for dinner," Viola said. "I should get home. George is probably still there." She studied my face again. "Miranda, is something wrong?" The truth rose to my lips. Then I pictured Thorn saying I had made everything emotional. I pictured myself telling my family that my fiancé hesitated over a wedding date and that I had secretly recorded him because of it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the recording contained nothing but sports, work, and jokes I would feel ashamed to have overheard. "I'm fine," I said. On the drive home, I rehearsed both possible futures. In one, I listened to the recording and discovered that Thorn had complained about venue costs or confessed to ordinary nerves. I would delete the file, hate myself for doubting him, and tell him about the baby. In the other, I found the reason his face had gone blank. I could not imagine what that reason might be. I only knew it had a shape in my mind now, a shadow standing just outside the life I thought was mine. When I pulled into the driveway, George's car was still there. Through the front window, I saw the 2 men laughing on the couch. For a moment, I sat behind the wheel and looked at the house. It was beautiful in the evening light. Cream siding, dark green shutters, a porch wide enough for 2 chairs and flower pots. My grandmother's money was in every beam and window, transformed into the home I believed would hold my family. I pressed both hands against the steering wheel. Please, I thought, please let me be wrong. Chapter 5. George opened the door before I reached it. There she is, he said, the woman who keeps this man alive. He hugged me warmly, and I forced myself to smile. Did you two eat? I asked. We had chips, Thorn said. That is not food. I went to the kitchen and began cooking. It was instinct by then. I took chicken from the refrigerator, chopped vegetables, started rice, and moved around the room while the men returned to their conversation. George came in twice to tell me how good everything smelled. At dinner, he praised the meal so enthusiastically that Thorn rolled his eyes. I'm serious, George said. You have no idea how lucky you are. Beautiful house, incredible food, a woman who actually loves you. Most men would crawl across broken glass for this. Thorn gave a small laugh. Don't make her head too big. The joke landed badly, though George did not seem to notice. I looked at Thorn across the table and wondered what he had said about me before I came home. Was I the woman he loved? Or the woman who cooked? George stayed until almost 10. We shared coffee and a store-bought cake I had picked up the day before. I laughed when they laughed. I asked questions. I played the part I had been playing for years: warm partner, gracious host, future wife. When George finally left, Thorn walked him to the driveway. I moved quickly. I reached behind the books, grabbed the phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. My pulse roared in my ears. Thorn returned a minute later. You okay? He asked. Just tired. You did a lot today. There was no gratitude in his voice. It was an observation, like noting that it had rained. He kissed my forehead. Come to bed. I followed him upstairs. I could not listen to the recording yet, not with him beside me, not while the house was silent enough for him to hear the smallest sound from my headphones. So I lay in bed while he slept. I watched the red numbers on the clock change from 11, 14 to 12, 03, then 1:27, then 2:51. Thorn's breathing remained slow and even. Once, he rolled toward me and rested an arm across my waist. The familiar weight of it nearly destroyed me. I remembered other nights, when he had held me after my grandmother died, when we had whispered about children, when we had chosen names we liked and laughed because he hated every name I suggested. I had trusted the man beside me with my body, my money, my future, and the softest parts of my heart. Now his arm felt like a lock. At 3:18, I could not bear it any longer. I slipped out of bed, took the phone and my headphones, and went into the bathroom. I turned on the shower so the water would cover any sound. Then I sat on the closed toilet lid, placed the headphones over my ears, and opened the recording. Chapter 6. The app had recorded only when it detected voices or movement, so hours of silence had been removed. At first, I heard exactly what I expected. George complaining about his boss, Thorn laughing about a college memory, a sports commentator shouting from the television, the pop of a beer bottle opening. I almost stopped listening. Then Thorn said my name. Miranda got a call from Willowbrook yesterday. George lowered the television volume. The wedding place. They had a cancellation in August. That's great, isn't it? There was a pause. Thorn exhaled. I panicked. My hand tightened around the phone. George's voice changed. Why? I'm not ready. You've been with her 5 years. I know. You live together. You bought a house together. I know, George. And she's good to you. Better than you deserve, honestly. Thorn gave a tired laugh. That's the problem. I stopped breathing. George said, what does that mean? Another bottle opened. Then Thorn spoke the name that divided my life in two. Abby's back. The shower continued running. Water struck the tile in a steady rush while I sat frozen 3 feet away. I knew who Abby was. Everyone who knew Thorn knew about Abby Mercer, his first love. They dated in college and for 2 years afterward. She left for New York, built a career in public relations, and eventually married someone with money. Thorn had told me the story early in our relationship. He said Abby had broken his heart. He said he was over her. I knew she existed in his past. I did not know she had returned to our city. On the recording, George swore softly. When? About 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. I began counting backward automatically. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in new shirts, the Saturday he said he had to help a coworker move, the evening he came home smelling faintly of a perfume I did not own. Have you seen her? George asked. A few times. A few times how? We had dinner. Thorn. Nothing happened at first. At first. The bathroom seemed to narrow around me. She says her marriage is over, Thorn continued. She came back because she needed a fresh start. We talked, and it was like, I don't know, like no time had passed. And Miranda. I love Miranda. Even on the recording, it sounded weak. But, George asked. Thorn was quiet for so long that I heard the commentator on television again. But Abby was the one I always wondered about. My stomach turned. George spoke carefully. Are you planning to leave Miranda? I don't know. That's why August is impossible. If I marry Miranda now, I close the door on Abby before I even know what this is. I pressed a fist against my mouth. George sounded disgusted. You're already engaged. The door should be closed. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You don't understand. Miranda is safe. The word sliced through me. She's steady, Thorn said. She makes life work. The house, bills, meals, everything. I know what I have with her. I'm not stupid enough to throw that away without knowing Abby is serious. George did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low. So Miranda is your insurance policy. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. I'm trying not to make a mistake. You're already making one. Thorn's irritation sharpened. I just need time. Abby and I have history. Miranda doesn't need to know anything unless I decide there's something worth leaving for. Unless Abby was worth it. Then he would leave. Until then, he would sleep in my bed, eat the meals I cooked, wear the shirts I ironed, and live in the house my inheritance had purchased. I was not his great love. I was his stability. I pulled off the headphones and bent forward as nausea rose violently through me. I barely reached the toilet before I was sick. The sound was swallowed by the shower. When it was over, I stayed on the floor with my cheek against the cold cabinet door, one hand on my stomach and the other gripping the phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake him, throw the device at his face, and demand to know how a person could accept so much love while privately measuring whether someone else might be better. But underneath, the rage was something colder. Clarity. Thorn did not know I was pregnant. He did not know I had heard him. For the first time in 5 years, I knew something he did not. And I understood that the truth was not going to free me gently. I would have to use it to cut myself loose. Chapter 7. I did not return to bed. I sat on the bathroom floor until dawn began turning the window gray. When Thorn's alarm rang, I switched off the shower, washed my face, and tried to make myself look like a woman with a headache instead of a woman whose entire life had just collapsed. He found me in the kitchen with a glass of water. You look awful, he said. I think I'm getting sick. He touched my forehead for less than a second. Maybe call out. I will. He poured coffee for himself. He did not make tea for me. He did not ask whether I needed medicine or whether he should stay. He complained that he was already running late, kissed the air near my temple, and left. The front door closed. I listened to his car pull away. Then I cried. Not neatly, not quietly. I sank onto the kitchen floor, wrapped my arms around my knees, and sobbed until my chest hurt. This was the same floor where we had eaten pizza the night we moved in, because the dining table had not arrived. Thorn had opened a bottle of cheap champagne and told me we were finally home. I wondered whether he had ever believed that. When I could breathe again, I called work and said I had a stomach bug. The lie was not entirely false. My body felt poisoned. For an hour, I did nothing. Then I began searching. I checked the pockets of the jackets Thorn had worn recently. I looked through the drawer where he dropped loose change, business cards, and receipts. I opened the center console of his old gym bag, a place he rarely cleaned. I hated myself with every movement. I also knew I would never again accept shame for seeking evidence of a betrayal he had chosen to commit. In the inside pocket of a charcoal blazer, I found the first receipt. Dinner for 2 at Bellini's. 2 in trays, a bottle of red wine, chocolate soufflé. The total was more than Thorn, and I usually spent on groceries for a week. Bellini's was the restaurant I had once suggested for our anniversary. He had checked the menu online and laughed. For those prices, the pasta should sing, he said. Let S be sensible. We had gone to a neighborhood grill instead. I had told myself the evening was romantic because he held my hand across the table. The receipt was dated that same month. I found another from a rooftop restaurant downtown, another from a wine bar near the river, another from a boutique hotel lounge. Each date matched a night Thorn had worked late. He was a project analyst for a regional logistics company. His job did not involve entertaining clients. He had no reason to order oysters and champagne at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, except that someone across the table mattered enough to impress. I spread the receipts over the kitchen island. The amounts blurred through my tears. He had called flowers a waste of money when I wanted fresh peonies for the dining room. He had postponed replacing our broken patio chairs because we needed to be careful. He had asked me to cover a larger share of the utility bill that month because he was temporarily tight. And all the while, he had been spending money on Abby in places he said were too expensive for me. That hurt in a way I could not explain even to myself. It was not about the restaurants. I would have eaten sandwiches on a park bench with a man who loved me. It was the effort. He had saved his excitement, generosity, and imagination for her. I received his fatigue, his excuses, and the practical leftovers of his life. I pressed both palms against the counter and closed my eyes. You are not less valuable because he treated you cheaply, I whispered. The words sounded like something Viola might say. I did not believe them yet, but I repeated them anyway. Chapter 8. Finding Abby online took less than 20 minutes. I knew her full name. I knew she had worked in New York. I knew roughly how old she was. The search results offered several women, but I recognized her immediately from an old college photograph Thorn had once shown me. Abby was beautiful in a polished, expensive way. Honey blonde hair, white teeth, perfect skin. She looked like someone who never left the house without knowing what impression she intended to make. Her profile was public. At first, I saw nothing connected to Thorn. Photographs from New York, work events, hotel balconies, art galleries, a caption about choosing yourself after a difficult chapter. Then I found a picture from 5 weeks earlier. Abby sat at Bellini's with a glass of red wine in front of her. Only her side of the table was visible, but a man's hand rested near the edge of the frame. Thorn wore a silver watch with a narrow black face. I had given it to him for his birthday. The hand in the photograph wore that watch. I stared until my eyes burned. The caption read, "Some people still remember exactly what you like." I scrolled farther. A photograph from the rooftop restaurant showed Abby in a blue dress, the city lights behind her. In the reflection of the window, I could make out Thorn holding the phone. Another showed 2 glasses of champagne beside a hotel fireplace. His knee was visible at the bottom corner. Another showed the river at sunset. The caption read, "Sometimes the right person finds you again." The right person. My fiancé. I clicked through every photograph, torturing myself with details. He had worn the navy shirt I ironed on Fridays. He had taken her to the jazz bar I had asked to visit for years. He had bought her flowers, white roses visible on the table, though he once told me cut flowers were dead plants with a markup. I imagined him choosing the restaurant, checking a reservation, wondering what she would wear. Had he looked forward to seeing her all day? Had he sat across from me at breakfast knowing he would be with her that night? Had he kissed me before leaving? I did not remember. That was another cruelty. Betrayal reaches backward and contaminates ordinary memories. Every late meeting becomes a date. Every distracted smile becomes a secret message. Every shower taken immediately after coming home becomes evidence. I saved screenshots to a private folder and emailed copies to myself. Then I found a photograph posted 3 days earlier. Abby stood in front of a pale stone fireplace, holding a wineglass. Our fireplace. The angle showed part of the living room, the built-in shelves, and the cream rug I had spent weeks choosing. My breath stopped. The caption was vague, trying on a different kind of future. I zoomed in. On the shelf behind her was the ceramic bowl my grandmother had painted. On the coffee table was the blue book I had been reading. Near the edge of the picture, one of my slippers was visible under the sofa. She had been inside my home. Chapter 9. The photograph had been taken the previous Thursday. I knew because the blue book on the coffee table was open to the page where I had left it before spending the night at my parents' house. My mother had undergone a minor procedure that week. Nothing dangerous, but my father worried, so I stayed overnight to help with meals and medication. Thorn had encouraged me to go. "Stay as long as they need you," he said. "I'll be fine here." I had kissed him in the doorway and thanked him for understanding. While I slept in my childhood bedroom, Abby slept in my house. I kept scrolling. Several hours after the fireplace picture, she had posted another image, not of herself, but of our kitchen at sunrise. The marble counters glowed in the early light. 2 coffee cups sat beside the sink. The caption read, "This might become my new little nest sooner than I expected." My new little nest. The house I had purchased with my grandmother's inheritance. The kitchen I had designed. The cups I had bought. The life I had built. She believed it might become hers. That meant Thorn had not simply brought her over for one reckless night. He had talked about a future. He had let her believe the house belonged to him, or at least that he could give it to her. I stumbled away from the computer and pressed a hand over my mouth. The room seemed full of ghosts. Here was the couch where Thorn and I had planned our wedding. Here was the table where I served dinner to his friend. Here was the staircase Abby must have climbed. Had she opened our bedroom door? Had she seen my clothes in the closet, my perfume on the dresser, the photograph of Thorn and me at the lake? Had she cared? Had he moved the picture before bringing her upstairs? A sound came out of me, half sob, half gasp. I went to the bedroom and stripped the sheets from the bed. I carried them to the laundry room, then stopped. Why was I washing away their betrayal for him? I dropped the sheets on the floor. For 5 years, I had believed Thorn's worst qualities were forgetfulness and selfishness. I had complained that he left dishes in the sink and never noticed when the trash was full. I had not understood that his selfishness was not a habit. It was a worldview. He accepted love as a service other people provided. My care did not move him because he had come to believe it was the natural background of his life, like electricity or running water. He noticed it only when it might be taken away. And still, some wounded part of me wanted him to come home, see my face, and choose me. That was the most humiliating truth of all. I loved him even after I knew what he was. Love did not disappear when evidence arrived. It stayed inside me, injured and confused, reaching toward the person who had caused the wound. I wrapped both arms around my stomach. "No," I whispered. I did not know whether I was speaking to myself, Thorn, or the child inside me. "No, we are not begging to be chosen." Chapter 10. I could have driven to my parents' house. They lived 40 minutes away in a quiet suburb, in the same brick home where Nick and I grew up. My mother would have made tea. My father would have stood in the doorway looking helpless and furious. But they were older now. My mother was still recovering. My father's blood pressure rose whenever he was upset. I could not arrive carrying a betrayal, a pregnancy, and the end of the future they had celebrated with me. So I called Viola. She answered on the second ring. "Miranda." I tried to speak. Nothing came out. Her voice changed instantly. "What happened?" "I need you." "Where are you?" "At home." "Is Thorn there?" "No." "Do not drive. Call a car. Come here." "I can drive." "No, you're crying so hard I can barely understand you. Call a car, Miranda. I'm staying on the phone until it arrives." I packed a small overnight bag without thinking clearly. Toothbrush, sweater, charger. The positive pregnancy test, still hidden inside a cosmetic bag. I placed the receipts and printed screenshots in a folder. Before leaving, I stood in the entryway and looked back. Nothing appeared different. The house did not announce what had happened inside it. Sunlight lay across the floor. A mug rested beside the sink. Thorn's shoes were near the door. I felt as if the house itself had betrayed me by remaining beautiful. Viola met me outside when the car arrived. She pulled me into her arms before I reached the steps. For several minutes, I could not tell the story. I sat at her kitchen table shaking while she poured water and waited. Then I began with the call from Willowbrook. I told her about Thorn's panic, the recorder, George's voice, Abby's name. I showed her the receipts. I showed her the photographs. When she saw Abby standing in my living room, Viola covered her mouth. That son of a, she stopped, looked toward Lily's playroom and lowered her voice. He brought her into your house. I nodded. Then I took the pregnancy test from my bag. I found out Friday. Viola stared at it. Her eyes filled immediately. Oh, Miranda. That was when I broke completely. I was going to tell him at the wedding, I sobbed. I was going to buy little booties. I thought he would be happy. I thought we were a family already. Viola came around the table and knelt beside me. You are a family, she said. You and this baby are a family. Thorn does not get to define that. But I loved him. I know. I gave him everything. I know. And it still wasn't enough. She gripped my hands. No, listen to me. You were enough. He was dishonest. Those are not the same thing. We cried until late afternoon. When Nick came home, he knew something was wrong before he took off his work boots. He listened without interrupting, his face becoming harder with every detail. When I finished, he stood so abruptly that the chair scraped across the floor. I'm going over there. No, I said. He put another woman in your bed. Nick, no. I just want to talk. Viola laughed bitterly. You are clenching both fists. I can talk with clenched fists. I stood and blocked the doorway. Please, I need you here, not in jail. That made him stop. He looked at me, really looked, and the anger in his face became grief. He pulled me against his chest the way he used to when we were children, and I woke from a nightmare. My phone rang while he held me. Thorn. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, he said, where are you? At Nick's. I'm staying here tonight. Oh. A television played in the background. He sounded distracted. Okay, see you tomorrow. He started to hang up. You know I was sick today, I said. What? This morning, I told you I was sick. A pause. Right, are you feeling better? Too late. The question came only because I reminded him to ask. I'll talk to you later, I said and ended the call. Then I looked at Viola and began crying again. He forgot, I whispered. He did not even remember that I was sick. Viola put her arms around me. Behind her, Nick turned away and wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. Chapter 11. That night, I slept in Nick and Viola's guest room with one hand resting over my stomach. Sleep came in fragments. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Abby in my living room. I heard Thorn saying safe, steady insurance policy without using the words. At 3 a.m, I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. Hi, I whispered to my baby. It felt foolish and necessary. I'm sorry, this is not how I wanted to welcome you. My voice broke. I wanted you to have a father who cried when he heard about you. I wanted us to bring you home to that house. I wanted so many things. I pressed my palm gently against my lower abdomen. But I want you. That part is not uncertain. I want you more than I have ever wanted anything. The words steadied me. I don't know where we'll live. I don't know what I'll tell him. I don't know how hard this will be. But I will not raise you in a home where love means waiting to be replaced. In the morning, Nick and Viola brought coffee, toast, and a plan. Nick sat at the foot of the bed with a legal pad. First, the house, he said. Your ownership is documented at 70%. Dad and I insisted on that for a reason. I remember being angry. You can apologize later. Despite everything, I smiled. I know a real estate attorney, he continued. We'll have him review the documents today. Thorn can buy your share if he qualifies. If he can't, the house gets sold. The thought of selling it hurt, but not as much as imagining Abby living there. Second, Viola said, you need distance. I can stay here. You can, as long as you want, but I have another option. Her uncle Matteo owned a small hotel near Verona. Summer was their busiest season, and one of the English-speaking front desk administrators had left unexpectedly. I called him this morning, Viola said. He remembers you from our wedding. The job includes a room at the hotel. You could work for a few months, breathe, and decide what comes next. Italy. The word sounded impossible. It doesn't have to be forever, she said. It can be an exit door. I thought of Thorn coming home, apologizing, promising to change. I knew how vulnerable I would be if I stayed nearby. One good speech, one night of tears, and I might confuse his fear of losing comfort with love. When could I go? I asked. Matteo said whenever you can get there. By noon, the plan was moving. Nick drove me home in his truck. 2 men from his construction crew followed in another vehicle to help pack and move my things. As we pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed. Thorn, work is going to be crazy tonight. Don't wait up, probably home around midnight. I looked at the message for a long time. Of course, I typed, don't rush. A question mark appeared almost immediately. I sent a smiling face. He took it as reassurance. That was the final service I performed for him. I allowed him to believe the stage was still standing while I quietly dismantled the set. We packed my clothes, books, documents, grandmother's ceramic bowl, family photographs, and everything I had purchased before or during the relationship. I left Thorn's belongings untouched. Nick found the stripped bed. He looked at me but did not ask. At the attorney's office, I signed authorization for him to handle communication about the house. Then I went to my job and resigned. My manager tried to persuade me to take leave instead, but I knew I needed a clean break. By evening, my belongings were stored at Nick's house. My passport was in my bag. Viola had helped me book a flight leaving the next afternoon. At the airport, while waiting at the gate, I made the mistake of checking Abby's profile one more time. She had posted a photograph from a candle-lit restaurant. Across the table, Thorn's face was finally visible. He was smiling at her, with an expression I had spent years trying to earn. I took a screenshot. Then I sent it to him with a message. Enjoy your dinner. I hope you're happy. P.S. I moved out. I took my belongings. My attorney will contact you about the sale of my 70% share of the house. Our relationship is over. Good luck, Thorn. The message showed as delivered. I turned off my phone. A boarding announcement filled the terminal. For one terrible second, I wanted to run back, to demand answers, to see his face, to make him understand exactly what he had lost. Then I remembered the child inside me. I picked up my bag and walked toward the gate. Chapter 12. I landed in Italy to 43 missed calls. Most were from Thorn. Some were from George and other mutual friends. 3 were from Thorn's mother. There were voice messages, texts, and emails with subjects ranging from please call me to what the hell are you doing? I ignored all of them. The only person I called was Nick. He answered immediately, although it was the middle of the night at home. You made it. I made it. Are you safe? Yes, I'm waiting for my bag. His relief was audible. We told Mom and Dad, he said. Carefully, Mom cried, but they're okay. Dad said he wants you to know he's proud of you. I closed my eyes. I should have called them myself. You can when you're settled. Something in his voice sounded guarded. What happened? I asked. Nothing you need to deal with right now. In the background, Viola said loudly, tell her. Nick sighed. Thorn came to the house. What house? Ours. He showed up last night demanding to know where you were. My grip tightened around the phone. He did not care where I was when he thought I was still available. I know. What did he do? He yelled, accused us of helping you run away, tried to push past me. We told him to leave. He wouldn't, so Viola called the police. You called the police. He left before they arrived. They still made a report. I leaned against a pillar in the baggage hall. The irony was almost unbearable. When I was home, sick and devastated, he had forgotten to ask how I felt. Once I removed myself from his reach, I became an emergency. Did he say anything about Abby? Nick gave a humorless laugh. He said it wasn't what you thought. There is a photograph of them at dinner, and a photograph of her in my living room. Apparently photographs are complicated now. Viola took the phone. Listen to me. Do not answer him tonight. You're exhausted. Mateo is meeting you outside customs. Call us when you reach the hotel. I will. And Miranda. Yes. You did not run away. You left a man who was betraying you. Those are different things. I repeated the sentence silently after we ended the call. I did not run away. I left. At that moment, the distinction was the only solid ground I had. Chapter 13. Mateo was waiting beyond customs, holding a piece of cardboard with my name written across it in thick blue marker. I recognized him from Nick and Viola's wedding, broad shoulders, silver at his temples, an expressive face that seemed built for laughter. When he saw me, he dropped the sign and opened both arms. Miranda, he said, pronouncing my name carefully. Welcome, Viola told us everything, you are safe here. Those 4 words nearly undid me. I had spent the entire flight holding myself together through force. I had refused to cry when the plane lifted away from the city. I had refused to cry when I saw Thorn's messages multiplying. I had refused to cry when the flight attendant asked whether I was traveling alone. But when a man I barely knew told me I was safe, my eyes filled. Mateo pretended not to notice. He took my suitcase, led me to a small car, and talked during the drive about practical things. The hotel, the village, the summer schedule, his wife Alina, who had prepared food in case I was hungry. The landscape outside the window looked unreal. Vineyards climbed gentle hills. Old stone houses stood under terracotta roofs. Cypress trees cut dark lines against the pale sky. It was beautiful. I felt nothing. Grief had flattened the world. Beauty could reach my eyes, but not my heart. The hotel was a converted villa on the edge of a small town near Lake Garda. It had 23 rooms, green shutters, a courtyard with lemon trees, and a dining terrace overlooking the hills. Alina met us at the front desk and embraced me as if we were family. You eat first, she said, then sleep, tomorrow everything else. My room was on the 3rd floor. It was simple but bright. A narrow bed, a wooden desk, a wardrobe, and French doors opening to a tiny balcony. There was no second toothbrush near the sink, no pair of men's shoes by the door, no voice calling from another room. One room. One key. For the first time in years, the space around me belonged entirely to me. That night, I turned on my phone. Thorn's messages arrived in waves. Call me now. What did you tell people? You misunderstood. Abby came over once. Nothing happened. You had no right to empty the house. We need to talk like adults. I love you. That final sentence hurt most because it had become a tool, not a truth. There was also a voice message from George. Miranda, I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you. I told Thorn he was wrong, but that isn't enough. I'm ashamed I stayed silent. I believed he was sorry. I did not answer him either. My first weeks at the hotel were filled with small humiliations and small victories. I knew no Italian beyond greetings, numbers, and a few phrases Viola taught me over video calls. Guests asked questions too quickly. I confused room numbers. I once sent a couple toward the train station when they had asked for a pharmacy. But I was useful in English, organized under pressure, and good with people. Mateo showed me the reservation system. Alina taught me how to prepare the breakfast room. A college student named Sophia corrected my pronunciation without making me feel foolish. Every morning, I woke nauseated. I ate dry crackers before leaving bed and kept ginger candies behind the desk. Mateo drove me to a doctor in the nearest city, where an ultrasound confirmed that the pregnancy was progressing normally. When the screen showed a small, flickering heartbeat, I cried so hard the technician handed me tissues without speaking. I wished Thorn had been there. I hated myself for wishing it. Both feelings could exist at once. That was one of the first lessons of my new life. At night, I stood on the balcony and listened to voices drifting from the courtyard. I thought about the house, the wedding, Abby, and the man I believed Thorn had been. I did not answer him. Silence was not revenge. It was the only place where he could no longer rewrite what he had done. Chapter 14. Nick handled the house exactly as he promised. The attorney notified Thorn that he could either buy my 70% share at an independently assessed value or cooperate with a sale. Thorn applied for financing and was denied. Without my income and without my inheritance behind the property, he could not afford the life he had pretended was his. The house went on the market. When Nick told me, I walked out of the hotel and sat alone beneath a lemon tree. I had expected satisfaction. Instead, I mourned. Selling the house did not erase the mornings I had loved there. It did not make the paint colors less mine or the garden less carefully planned. A place can be contaminated by betrayal and still contain real happiness. Losing it felt like losing a body that had once carried my dreams. "I'm sorry," Nick said over the phone. "It has to be done." "Yes." Does he understand that? He understands that he's angry. That sounded like Thorn. A month later, in a moment of weakness, I checked Abby's profile. The photographs of Thorn were gone. Not archived among older posts, gone. Her captions had shifted from second chances and old flames to independence, standards, and refusing to settle. I told Viola during our next call. She hesitated. "What?" I asked. "I know why." "Tell me." Abby thought the house was Thorn S. A hard laugh escaped me. "Of course she did. When she found out you owned 70% and Thorn could not keep it, things changed. She also learned what he earns." He told her he made more. Apparently, he let her assume quite a lot. Viola's mouth tightened on the screen. She left him for one of his friends, not George, another man with a successful real estate business. I waited for pleasure to arrive. It did not. There was only exhaustion. "So now he lost both women," I said. More like he lost one woman and discovered the other never wanted him. Viola paused. "He's been drinking. He came to our house twice. The second time he sat on the front steps and cried." I looked away. "What did he say?" "That he ruined his life. That he threw away the only woman who ever truly loved him." The words landed in the damaged place inside me that still wanted acknowledgement. For months, I had imagined Thorn finally understanding what he lost. I thought the knowledge might heal me. It did not. He understood my value only after Abby rejected him and the house slipped away. His grief was real, perhaps, but it was grief for consequences. Viola studied me. "I think he learned his lesson," she said cautiously. "If your goal was to scare him, it worked. He would probably spend the rest of his life eating out of your hand." I looked at her sharply. "Do you think I should go back?" "No," she exhaled so loudly that the sound crackled through the phone. "Thank God, no. I was afraid you might." "Then why tell me?" "Because I want to be honest with you. Everyone made decisions for you while Thorn lied. You deserve facts, even when they're complicated." I nodded slowly. "I don't want him back." Saying it aloud felt different this time. Not angry, not defensive. "True. I loved who I thought he was," I said. "I'm not willing to become the safe choice again just because his exciting choice walked away." Viola smiled through tears. "That's my girl." The summer season was beginning to slow. Mateo had always been clear that the hotel position might not remain full-time through winter. But by then, I had made contacts. A private language school in Verona needed a native English-speaking administrator who could also assist with conversation classes. They knew I was pregnant. They offered stable hours and helped me locate an apartment. "I think I'm staying," I told Viola. "In Italy?" "Yes." "What about the baby?" "They know. Mateo helped me find a doctor near the apartment. The school has maternity leave. I can make this work." For the first time since the recording, I heard confidence in my own voice. I was no longer only leaving something. I was choosing something. Chapter 15. My apartment was small enough that I could stand in the kitchen and see almost every room. I loved it. There were pale floors, tall windows, and a narrow balcony where I grew basil badly. The furniture was mostly second-hand. The sofa had one cushion softer than the others. The kitchen table wobbled unless I folded a piece of cardboard under one leg. Nothing matched. Everything was mine. I began working at the language school in early fall. At first, I managed schedules, answered inquiries from foreign students, and helped teachers communicate with English-speaking families. Eventually, I led small conversation sessions. My Italian improved slowly. I learned to order at the market, speak with my landlord, and understand the old woman downstairs when she complained affectionately that I was too thin. Pregnancy changed my body and my sense of time. Weeks were measured in doctor visits, tiny movements, and the gradual tightening of my clothes. The first time I felt the baby kick, I was alone at my desk after everyone else had gone home. I froze. Then it happened again, small, definite, alive. I laughed and cried in the empty classroom. "Hello," I whispered. "There you are." My parents called every Sunday. My mother mailed baby blankets even though international shipping cost more than the blankets. My father tried to hide his concern behind questions about the apartment locks and the reliability of public transportation. Nick and Viola involved Lily in every video call. She pressed her face too close to the camera and shouted at my stomach. "Baby, come out." "Not yet," I told her. "He needs more time." I learned the baby was a boy during an ultrasound in October. I named him Colin after my grandfather, a gentle man who repaired clocks and never raised his voice. Thorn continued sending messages for months. They changed in tone. First angry, then apologetic, then nostalgic. He sent photographs of places we had visited and wrote, "Remember this." He promised counseling. He promised honesty. He said Abby meant nothing. He said losing me had changed him. I never answered. The house sold in November. After the mortgage and costs were paid, my share gave me enough savings to feel safe. Not wealthy, safe. I used part of it for the baby, part for legal advice, and kept the rest untouched. When my due date approached, my family came to Italy. My parents arrived first, exhausted and overwhelmed by the airport. Nick, Viola, and Lily came 2 days later. My apartment became crowded with suitcases, food containers, and conflicting opinions about where the baby should sleep. For the first time since leaving home, I did not feel alone. Labor began before dawn on a rainy morning. The pain was unlike anything I had known, physical, consuming, impossible to negotiate with. Between contractions, I thought of all the ways I had once mistaken endurance for love. This pain was different. This pain was taking me somewhere. My mother held one hand. Viola held the other. Nick paced outside the room until a nurse threatened to remove him from the hallway. When Colin was finally placed against my chest, the world became very quiet. He was red-faced, furious, and perfect. His dark hair lay damp against his head. His fingers opened and closed against my skin. I looked at him and understood that my life had not ended in that bathroom, with a recording playing through my headphones. It had turned. Everything I lost had brought me to this exact moment, not because betrayal was necessary or good, but because I had refused to let it decide what came next. "I'm your mother," I whispered. Colin stopped crying for one breath, as if listening. "And I choose you." Chapter 16. I waited 4 days before contacting Thorn. Not because I was uncertain that he had a right to know, because I needed 4 days in which Colin's birth belonged only to peace. I spoke with an attorney before sending anything. Thorn was not listed on the Italian birth registration because we were unmarried and he was not present to acknowledge paternity. That did not erase his ability to establish it later. It simply meant I was not going to complete legal steps on his behalf while recovering from childbirth. I chose one photograph. Colin was wrapped in a cream blanket, his eyes closed, one hand beside his cheek. I sent it with a message. His name is Colin Ellis. He was born on March 3 at 6:42 a.m. He is healthy. You are his biological father. I did not list you on the birth registration because you were not present, but I believe you have the right to know he exists. The phone rang less than a minute later. I did not answer. It rang again. And again. Then messages appeared. What? Miranda, answer me. Is this real? That's my son. Why didn't you tell me? Please pick up. My mother sat beside me on the sofa, while Colin slept in a bassinet nearby. You don't have to answer today, she said. I think I do. No, you think you still have to respond whenever he demands it. The observation stung, because it was true. I waited until Colin woke, fed him, and settled him again. Then I called Thorn. He answered before the first ring ended. Miranda. His voice cracked. Yes. For several seconds, all I heard was breathing. He's mine. Yes. When did you know? Before the call from Willowbrook. He made a broken sound. You were pregnant when you left. Yes. And you didn't tell me. I had planned to tell you at our wedding. Silence. I imagined the sentence reaching him fully. The wedding he refused because he wanted time to choose Abby. Then he began to cry. I had never heard Thorn cry like that. For a moment, the old part of me responded automatically. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to say it would be all right. I looked at Colin. I said nothing. I have a son, Thorn whispered. Yes. I want to see him. You can arrange a visit. You need to come home. No. His grief shifted so quickly into anger that I almost missed the transition. You cannot keep my child in another country. I am not keeping him from you. I live here. You can come here and see him. You made that decision without me. You made a great many decisions without me. That is different. How? I made a mistake. You carried on a relationship with Abby for weeks. You brought her into our home. You discussed leaving me only if she proved serious enough. That was not one mistake. It was a system. You destroyed our life by running away. The sentence was so outrageous that I laughed. Our life, I said. Which life? The one where I cooked dinner while you took Abby to restaurants you said we could afford. The one where I paid for most of the house while you promised it to her. The one where you kept me as insurance. I never called you that. You didn't need to. You should have confronted me. So you could lie better. You should have told me about the baby. You are right about one thing. You are his father, and that is why I contacted you. But you do not get to use Colin to put me back under your control. His voice hardened. I'll get joint custody. The threat was meant to frighten me. It did. My hand shook, but my voice stayed calm. I am not refusing contact. Come to Italy. Visit your son twice a week if you can manage it. Establish paternity through the proper process. Speak to attorneys. I will do the same. You know I can't just move to Italy. That is not a decision I made for you. You're punishing me. No, Thorn. Consequences are not punishment just because you don't like them. Colin began to fuss in the bassinet. I have to go. Miranda, wait. I ended the call. My hands trembled afterward. My mother took the phone from me and placed it on the table. You did well, she said. I looked at my son. I'm scared. I know. I don't want to spend my life fighting him. You won't spend your life doing anything, she said. You will handle one day, then the next. So I picked up Colin. One day. Then the next. Chapter 17. Thorn's mother called 2 days later. I had always liked Diane. She sent me birthday cards, asked for my recipes, and called me the daughter she never had. When Thorn and I bought the house, she gave us a framed blessing for the entryway. Her first words were not congratulations. How could you do this to my son? I closed my eyes. Hello, Diane. He has been out of his mind. You hid his child from him and left the country. I left because he was having an affair. He said nothing happened. He brought Abby into our bedroom. You don't know that. I know she spent the night in our house. I know they were dating. I heard Thorn tell George that he did not want to marry me until he knew whether Abby was serious. Diane was quiet. I continued, because I was tired of carrying the clean version of her son for everyone else. He accepted my money, my care, and my loyalty while planning to replace me. Abby posted photographs from expensive dates he told me we could not afford. She posted my house as her future home. He did not choose me, Diane. He kept me available. He made a terrible mistake. Yes. And now there is a child. Yes. Then you have to think about what is best for him. I do that every day. What is best is a mother and father together. Not when the father lies to the mother and treats her as a backup plan. People forgive infidelity. People also leave. Her voice sharpened. You need to come home. Thorn deserves the chance to be a father. We deserve to know our grandson. Your parents must agree that this is wrong. My parents are here holding him. That silenced her for a moment. You owe it to Thorn to try, she said finally. You owe it to Colin. You owe it to both families. I looked across the room. My father sat in a chair with Colin asleep on his chest, one large hand protecting the baby's back. My mother folded tiny clothes at the table. Through the open window, church bells marked the hour. For years, I had organized my life around what I owed. I owed Thorn patience because work stressed him. I owed him understanding because the thought of marriage made him nervous. I owed the house my inheritance because we were building a future. I owed our relationship silence because conflict might drive him away. Every debt had been invented to keep me giving. No, I said. Diane seemed not to understand. No what? I don't owe Thorn reconciliation. I don't owe you relocation. I don't owe anyone access to my life on their terms. That baby is not only yours. I know. That is why Thorn was informed. He can take responsible legal steps and arrange visits. You may visit too, respectfully. But I will not return to the man who betrayed me because it would make his consequences more convenient. You are being selfish. Perhaps it looks selfish when a woman stops sacrificing herself. Miranda. I have to feed my son. Goodbye, Diane. I ended the call. This time, my hands did not shake. Weeks later, Viola told me that Thorn and his parents had begun telling people I had kidnapped the baby and fled to Europe. They claimed they would force me home and demand custody. They're making a lot of noise, Viola said, but the attorney says noise is not a court order. Thorn never followed through with the dramatic threats he made around town. Legal action across countries required money, consistency, and a willingness to submit his own behavior to scrutiny. He had little of the first and even less of the other, too. He did establish paternity later through attorneys. We arranged scheduled video calls and a structure for in-person visits. The first time he came to Italy, he arrived full of anger and left quieter after holding Colin. I did not stop him from loving his son. I stopped him from using fatherhood as a road back into my home. There was a difference. Over time, the gossip faded. People grew bored. Thorn's grand declarations became embarrassing even to those who had repeated them. My life, meanwhile, continued. That was the victory he never expected. Chapter 18. By Colin's first birthday, Italy no longer felt like the place I had escaped to. It felt like home. I moved into a slightly larger apartment with sunlight in the bedrooms and a courtyard where children played in the evenings. I continued working at the language school and began teaching more classes. My Italian became good enough that I could argue with utility companies, joke with neighbors, and understand when the old woman downstairs told strangers that Colin was practically her grandson. Matteo and Alina became family. Sophia became one of my closest friends. My parents visited again in the fall, and Nick brought Lily, who treated every fountain as a personal invitation to get wet. Life was not perfect. There were nights Colin cried for hours, and I cried with him. There were doctor bills, paperwork, loneliness, and moments when I saw a father lifting his child in the park and felt grief move through me unexpectedly. There were also mornings when Colin woke smiling. There were first steps across uneven kitchen tiles. There was his small hand in mine as we walked to the market. There was basil on the balcony, better now because my neighbor had taught me not to drown it. There was work that mattered, friendships that did not require performance, and a home where no one treated my love as furniture. Thorn remained part of Colin's life at a distance. He visited when he could. Sometimes he was kind. Sometimes he was bitter. He never stopped believing there should have been a path back to me once Abby left. But regret is not repair. Wanting back the woman you undervalued is not the same as becoming worthy of her. One evening, after Colin fell asleep, I stood on the balcony watching the sky turn pink over the rooftops. I thought about Willowbrook Estate. I thought about the August wedding date that once seemed like fate. For a long time, I had seen that call as the beginning of my tragedy. But if the venue had not called, Thorn might have continued lying for months. Perhaps I would have married him. Perhaps Abby would have remained uncertain long enough for him to keep both of us in different versions of the same future. The call did not destroy my happiness. It exposed that the happiness I was protecting had already been hollowed out. I used to believe strength meant staying calm, being understanding, and carrying more than my share without complaint. Now I knew better. Strength was listening when my own heart told me something was wrong. Strength was leaving a beautiful house because it had become a cage. Strength was walking through an airport while every part of me wanted to turn back. Strength was giving birth in a country that had once been foreign and building a life there one uncertain day at a time. Most of all, strength was refusing to teach my son that a woman's love must be earned by endless sacrifice. Colin stirred in the bedroom. I went inside and found him sitting in his crib, hair standing in every direction, cheeks warm from sleep. "Mama," he said. Just one word. A whole life inside it. I lifted him, and he rested his head on my shoulder. Outside, the bells began to ring. Once, I thought I owed everyone a version of myself that made their lives easier. Thorn wanted the loyal woman waiting at home, while he searched for something better. His mother wanted the forgiving woman who returned, so the family would not have to feel ashamed. Even I had wanted the perfect woman who could love enough to make betrayal impossible. That woman no longer existed. In her place was someone I respected. A mother. A woman with her own key, her own income, her own future. A woman who had finally learned that love is not a debt, and dignity is not selfishness. I kissed Colin's hair and carried him toward the open window, where the warm evening air moved through our home. I had lost a fiancé, a house, and the future I thought I needed. What I gained was a life no one could threaten to take away by choosing someone else. And for the first time, I did not need to be chosen. I had chosen myself.